radio show and podcast. I am your host, Richard Franzi. This is podcast episode number 1084. As a business owner, it's important to know the ins and the outs of corporate law and business law. And as an attorney with over 20 years of experience, I've invited John Ohashi to come here and share some of the answers that he has to some of your questions. John, welcome to Critical Mass Radio Show and Podcast.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here in the studio. John and I have known each other for quite some time. I'm excited to have him on the program. Before we get into the type of law, and I've read the T's a little bit, but maybe we can start with a little reflection about you. Think back to all those years ago, John, and what got you interested in law and business law?
Wow. Getting me interested in law at beginning, I started in UCLA. I was very socially conscious at the time. This was in the 80s, and issues like affirmative action and things that which seemed monumental to me. Constitutional law, how you could use the power of the law to get things done was really exciting to me. And so I thought, wow, that would be a great place to go. So I got into law with the idea of doing that kind of work. And once you get into law school and afterwards you want to figure out what it is you want to do with your career, what you want to do with your life, and it turns out that, as I tell others, that what you end up doing in law is sometimes a reflection of what your first job is.
What do you mean?
As opposed to what it is you want to be, it's whatever that first job is that's offered to you.
Okay. Your way into the profession.
Yes,
yeah.
right. And after my, I did well in some classes. But then I did really well in business, tax, securities.
Wow.
And so I said, okay, great. And I had an entree to a law firm, a corporate law firm in Orange County that asked me to come down as a summer clerk. And I worked there. And they liked me enough, they made me an offer to come back. Mm-hmm. And so that's what started my journey into corporate and business law.
That's interesting. And I heard undergrad at UCLA.
Yes.
And your law degree is?
UC Davis.
UC Davis. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Both very good schools. Congratulations,
Oh,
John.
thank you.
So let's talk about the fact that not only are you a practicing professional attorney lawyer, you're also an entrepreneur and business owner yourself.
Sure. Well, as a sole practitioner now, small firm, I've got to be.
Right.
Can't rely on a firm. When I worked for law firms, it was the work was segregated, right? You could always have. I worked when I first firm I worked with. The senior partner was very established, a good guy. Growing a firm, and we had this conversation about what does it take to grow a firm? How do you make it bigger? And he said, look, John, I could always go out and hire somebody to come down here and crank work. But it's the guy that's going to go out there and source business and bring it in and network, and that's the guy that I want. That's the value.
Okay.
He's my future partner.
Wow.
And so I thought, wow, okay, that sure makes a lot of sense to me. So I've always kept that in mind.
Right. I think we saw that in the Great Recession, John, that those professionals, whether they be attorneys or CPAs or whatever, who were good technical skills but didn't have their own book of business, they were the first to be at risk when times got tough within these larger firms.
Oh, they got beat up. They got the boot.
They did. They said, so shown the door.
Right.
All right. So
Unfortunate.
tell me about the niche that you focus on in your practice. What type of firms do you work with, and who do you help?
Oh, okay, sure. Business law encompasses the whole range, middle level. I have some large multinational corporate clients.
Right.
But to me, my niche and where I really enjoy the practice is with the startup entrepreneur.
Why?
The excitement, the energy.
Okay.
Unique, challenges and issues of startups. It's just a very different kind of a world.
Right. Very raw, huh?
Very. It's street.
Right.
If you start
fighting for survival.
Oh yeah. I mean, you practice in large law firm practices where I've done that. I mean, when I worked for a while in West Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, with a firm, business law, but we did things. They had large clients. I think the Home Depot was one of their clients to help them expand in the Western United States. But things like offering circulars, private placement memorandums, SEC filings. Those are all things that are for business law, but it's really sort of a very academic, heady type of a practice. It's ivory tower.
Okay.
Working with entrepreneurs, it's like being in the weeds.
Uh-huh.
So it's more earthy, it's more fun.
So how do you find these early stage entrepreneurs? What are you doing to bring them, other than being here on Critical Mass Radio Show and Podcast,
Right.
John?
Thank you. Yes. Well, I find that I like to be among them.
Okay.
Well, I mean that's how I started the practice. When in the early '90s, the Great Recession of '92, '93
Yes.
just decimated law firms left and right, and in our case, the firm dissolved and we went our separate ways. And I thought, wow, I mean, if you've ever been in a situation where you, at whatever type of job, and you get laid off and you had no control over it, it's just like a totally below average experience, right?
Yes.
So I never wanted that to happen again, and so I said, well, now's the time. Okay, I've been in this for a few years. Let's start up
Okay.
a practice.
Okay.
And the conventional wisdom at the time was that, well, you should go sublease from an existing law firm, and then that way, if they have any leftover work, they could feed it to you.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Alternatively,
They're convenient.
right? Or if you have an expertise that will help them, they can refer clients to you. But I spoke with various law firms about doing that, but it just quite frankly wasn't very appealing, to be back in that law firm environment. So what I did was I went out and got a space on a floor, an office building, very much like this one, where a floor where you're surrounded by businesses. And it turns out there was only one other attorney in the building. So
Location.
Oh, amazing, yeah. So I got space there, and then I started hanging out with the entrepreneurs. We go out to lunch, go out to just have conversations, and so it was just a very different environment than being in a law firm. In law firms, it's a lot of the practice of law is about risk management.
Right.
How do you manage this risk?
Right.
How do you protect somebody? On the flip side, you go and you hang out with entrepreneurs, and they're very comfortable with risk.
Right.
Risk is what what drives them. And
Adrenaline junkies.
right,
sometimes, right?
exactly. And so their focus is, well, how do we establish this business? How do we grow it? How do we look forward?
Right.
In many ways, in the practice of law is sort of looking backwards at times. But the entrepreneur was all about looking forward, growth, and it was intoxicating. It was a lot of fun, and I found that I had to learn business. To be able to communicate with them properly, I had to really be able to learn business, and which I picked up from them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And just try to get smarter, because as lawyers, we say, young lawyers come out, they know a lot about law, but they don't know diddly squat about business. So I thought I better get up to speed real
Right.
quick.
So that was very fortunate then, right?
Oh, it was amazingly fortunate.
Right. Sometimes luck plays a role in our careers, doesn't it, John?
I think it's sometimes better to be lucky than good.
Right.
Okay,
Right
and let me
place at the right time.
just very quickly, if I can give you an example.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so all right, so I'm trying to start up a practice. I'm looking through my Rolodex. I'm running out of people to call. Networking to do. So then I get a call. It's from an international airline, and they flew from Seattle to Asia, and they had just moved their offices to LAX. So they were tasked, once they moved to LAX, the general manager had tasked one of their admins to go out and find us a lawyer. So the admin went out to the lobby of the building, looked and said, Ohashi, law, and called me up and said, how would you be interested in doing work for this company? We're an international airline, and I had to pinch myself at first, but then I thought for about 30 seconds and said, sure, I should be able to help you.
Wow, that is a really lucky building you're in, John.
I tell that yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was luck.
That is luck, and you still have them today.
Absolutely.
Wow,
it's 25 years later,
It's
and
customer service.
yeah, and
It's nice to have an anchor account like that, I'm sure.
it's wonderful. Not only that, to get upgrades on airlines to
Okay,
Asia.
Now you're just rubbing it in. All right, John, we're going to take our first and only break. So loyal listeners on the radio show, this is like a 30-second something that's from me. I also know that you're giving back by teaching at night and teaching students, and I'm wondering if we could have a conversation about what you're observing in your student population as the millennials come through law school.
Sure.
All right.
Do so.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to miss this, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk about that with John after this word from me. Show and podcast. I am your host, Richard Franzi. All of our shows can be heard any time of the day or night on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker.com, several hundred former guest websites whose CEOs have been on our show. John Ohashi is going to put our show on his website. And since we started in 2009 with our show, we've reached hundreds of thousands of listeners through the live stream here on octalkradio.net, the podcast that I talked about, and the other channels like YouTube, because we're actually streaming this live on Critical Mass's Facebook page and other platforms, and it'll be up on YouTube shortly. Simply type in Critical Mass Radio Show in your favorite podcasting software to find our weekly shows with great guests like John Ohashi. Okay, before the break, I said you were going to tell us a little bit about what you're observing. So first of all, tell us where you teach and what you teach, and then we'll get into the millennial stories.
Oh, yeah. I'm an adjunct professor at Western State College of Law in Irvine.
Uh-huh.
Moved down from Fullerton a few years ago, and so now we're down by the Spectrum.
Okay. And how long have you been teaching?
Well, I've been teaching about 10 years.
Okay.
I've taught a couple of classes. One is advising entrepreneurs. That's trying to teach lawyers or young or law students how to work with startup clients.
Okay, so you're using your experience then.
Oh, absolutely. And I look at it as not just teaching students, but I try to be very practical to try and treat them as though they're first-year associates. So, try to give them some skills so that they are actually valuable to someone that hires them. I hate to say it, start building from day one.
Right. So what's that class kind of look like? I mean, is it case study? What do you do with these guys?
Oh, no, not at all. I bring in the practice to the classroom.
Okay.
A lot of the scenarios that we work with are actual case studies.
So real life.
Ongoing, absolutely. Right now, though, I'm teaching corporate finance and accounting for lawyers.
Oh boy.
It's a little different. It's a long story how that happened, but I helped out the law school to help them teach a class, and then. But for some reason, the classes it's picked up in popularity, and who would ever thunk it?
It sounds dry as hell.
Oh my God! Yeah,
but it's not, obviously.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to use the mindset of trying to make the class practical.
Okay.
As opposed to just being academic. That. When they mumble jumble that students learn, and then right after the final exam, pull the handle and flush it. So try to make it useful and worthwhile for them to for their upcoming legal careers.
Okay. So when we were meeting before, we were just kind of talking, and you were saying you're noticing sort of a trend, or at least an appearance of a trend in the interest of the millennials that are in your class. Can you share that with our audience?
Yeah. It just. Well, in some of the recent classes, when I say millennials, I'm talking about the younger millennials now. They're 23, 25.
Right.
Unlike the older millennials, I say 3-4 years ago, they didn't seem that interested. They were taking the class just to get the units.
Which class are we talking about?
Corporate finance and accounting. They would take the class, get the units, and see if they can just whatever. But they didn't seem really interested in the subject matter, and it was just very, I guess it was dry. And I would just talk about, there's one topic where we start talking about valuation of stock. How do you value it? Current discount value of cash flows, and just all the usual academic dry stuff, right?
Right.
And then one of the students just recently raised his hand and said, "Yeah, what Professor, how do you make money?" And I said, well, what do you mean? Because it sounds like an incredibly naive question, right? How do you make money? And I thought maybe it's like pulling my leg or something.
Right.
But he was dead serious.
Okay.
And then as I explored it, it was clear that these students, really didn't have a concept of entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial. Because I asked the student, I said, okay, well, let me ask you a basic question. When you, if you want to make money selling a product, so you have a product, you buy low, and you sell, and
really?
Silence.
There's no call and response to that?
Silence.
Wow.
Yeah. No. I said no. You buy low, you sell high, and it's like wow, whoa. And I'm not exaggerating. It was almost that type of reaction, and so I felt that it was, at least with this group. I think in the earlier millennials, they were never raised in a growth environment.
Right. Yeah.
They were in I don't know.
That's probably true, the recession.
Right. Yeah. Between 08, 09, and then maybe in 2013 and forward, it was pretty tough.
Right.
It was tough for us lawyers,
Right.
I mean, so I'm sure for law students, it was just absolutely brutal. But so the students are asking, so Professor, how do you make money? And so I felt it was important to now get into, at least spend some time, maybe a couple of weeks a semester, talking about entrepreneurship, analyzing businesses, looking at entrepreneurs, startups, how do they make money, what are the things you look for in analyzing a business. And
this is practical knowledge then.
Absolutely, just absolutely practical. Just trying to get the.
Are you stretching the syllabus a little bit to include this in it, John?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am, and I want to thank Dean Keller for allowing me to do so.
Okay, right.
It's because, quite frankly, corporate finance and accounting, it's one of those courses where really you can learn a lot of stuff. CapEx, Cap this, and I tell them, look. This is corporate finance accounting for lawyers. It's not corporate finance accounting for investment advisors,
right.
for CFOs.
Right.
Okay, this is what it's for. And so that is, so that's what makes I think unique.
Right. And do you plan on continuing to teach?
Oh, absolutely. Teaching is a great thing, especially as you're dealing with millennials. You get them when their minds are flexible.
Okay.
They're not into groupthink as millennials or whatever, but in a classroom setting, there's some doctrine stuff that we try to teach, some basics, but then they have a different take on it, just because it's hard to explain. They just have a different way of looking at things, and so and I don't want to turn into a fossil,
right,
as I get older,
right.
And
so I would think one of the unintended consequences of being around these young people is it does probably challenge your thinking a little bit, right? Keeps you relevant.
Right. Challenges your assumptions. How did you come to the conclusions that you've reached?
Right.
Are those still relevant in today's techno world?
And do they fly? Because sometimes what people would accept before, I might find the millennial generation questions deeper than previous generations might have. So, and I don't know how much older some of your clients are than maybe the students that are in your classroom, since you're working with early stage companies a lot, right?
Well, it's really interesting with early stage companies. I'm finding over the last year or so, I have a number of new clients, entrepreneurs that are in their 50s.
Oh, wow.
And,
yeah.
And
too young to, old enough to retire, but too young to retire, kind of thing, right?
Right. It's and I'm trying to bring in some of the thoughts of what the younger generation is bringing. Maybe, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And we have some good conversations about that.
Wow. You're like at a nexus then. You're like you're connecting the older people with the younger people.
Yeah, I feel like a modem. That's what it is,
Okay, modem. Ladies and gentlemen, for the millennials, that's an arcade piece of the. Okay, so if someone would like to learn more about you and your law practice, how would they find you? Where would you suggest they go, John?
Well, they can just take a look at my website, Ohashi Law.
Spell that.
Yeah, OHASHILAW.com.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, thank you for being here on the radio show and spending 20 minutes with us, sharing a bit about your professional background and your business. It's been enjoyable. I've been looking forward to seeing you again.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
And welcome to the Critical Mass community, and thanks for being a friend of the program.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, I'd like to thank Paul Roberts, always in the chair there, Paul Roberts, who's our producer for this show each and every week. Our other producers, who we couldn't do the show without, Joan Park, Crystal Nunley, and Haley Stern. If you'd like to connect with me on social media, let's start with LinkedIn. I'm Richard Franzi, Franzi. My company's website is Critical Mass for FOR, criticalmassforbusiness.com. If you're listening to us live or recently close to this live appearance here of John Ohashi, I want to let you know that my third book, Killing Cats Leads to Rats, will be available on Amazon.com on March 29th. So if you're looking for a good read about how unintended consequences can ravage business performance and affect employee morale, I hope you'll consider buying either a Kindle version, a paperback version, or an audible version of Killing Cats Leads to Rats. Until our next show, I hope all of your business decisions will move your company in a positive direction.